So a little bit about myself. I think this was already covered, but I'll just add in that, I've been with Microsoft since 2021. Before that, I was a consultant, and before that, for many, many years, I worked in television at the Discovery Channel. So this is sort of my second career, thanks to the Power Platform. I'm happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. That's my QR code. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And if you, yeah, it is a very cool job. I really do enjoy my job for sure. And I also enjoyed working at Discovery. That was fun too. My agenda for today is real simple. I'm going to do a quick overview for folks who may be new to the Power Platform and Azure, and then I'm going to get into the meat of the presentation, which are demos, and then Q&A. And then if I'm running long, Gregory, just tell me, and I'll finish up. But
there's
hopefully,
no such thing as running too long here, because sometimes we go pretty long. So
all right,
you are
cool.
set.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I respect everybody's time, so I'm sure people. I mean, I know on the East Coast it's almost 8:15 here. Well, actually, it's past 8:15. So, but I guess most of you are on the West Coast, so it's not that late there. But let's start off with just kind of getting to know each other a little bit. This topic is about the combination of Azure and Power Platform, but I'd like to get a feel for what everyone's experiences are with these two tools. So if you could either use the raise your hand feature or put it in the chat, how many of you have used Azure, or how many of you have never used Azure? Okay, so let's start with used Azure. So we got 1 used Azure. 3, okay, use that. 5 have used Azure. We got 6, 7. All right, 8. Oh wow, excellent. Okay, all right.
Heck yeah,
Anybody else?
Portlanders.
All
We
right, so
know our
let's
Azure.
lower our hands, and then anybody here who's never used Azure, maybe never heard of Azure, don't know what that is. Anybody? It's totally okay if you have. Okay, all right. Excellent. Well, I'll do my best, Scott, to address that. And again, if anything goes over your head, please don't sit there silently cursing me. Just come off mute and tell me, ask me what I'm talking about. Is anybody here working with a government agency, federal, state, local? Anybody here working with the government? Okay. What one? All right. Cool, cool, cool. Locked for business uses. Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, the reason I asked is because I specifically work with federal civilian agencies. I'm part of what is now called Microsoft U.S. Federal. I'm part of the U.S. public sector team. And so some of the content you're going to see today, actually all of it is actually built in government cloud and it originated, as you'll see, because of government needs. But I'm going to try to make this as relevant as I can for everybody else. So, hopefully you'll learn something from this. Is there anybody here? I hope the answer is no, but just out of curiosity, is there anybody who stumbled into this call who's never heard of the Power Platform? Okay. No, that's good. So real quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides because it sounds like I've got a knowledgeable audience. Obviously, the Power Platform is really a marketing term. It's an umbrella that covers a lot of different products and services. Today, I'm going to be focusing primarily on Power Apps, Power Automate, Dataverse, and AI Builder. Those are the things that I'm going to be, Charles. Yeah, so that's kind of where my focus is going to be. I'm going to be looking at those things. Might have some time for some other things sprinkled in there, depending on timing, but yeah, that's the main focus. The thing to keep in mind when you're talking about Power Platform is just part of the Microsoft Cloud. The reason we're having this session is because underneath it all, underneath everything we do in Microsoft Cloud is Azure. Azure is the backbone on which everything lives. In fact, Power Platform products and services really are just wrappers that are wrapping up existing Azure services and making them easier to use for end users. So you don't have to know Azure. You don't have to know all of the pieces that are running under the hood. But sometimes you get into the Power Platform, you get into building something, and you get to a point where you realize, oh my God, I don't know how to proceed. I can't go any further. And when those situations come up, that's where Azure is. And so this is a story about that. Although, as you'll see, it's kind of told in the reverse order that normally is. But I just wanted you to know we believe here that the two are better together. So it's not an or, it's an and. Use Power Platform and Azure. Use them together. And generally speaking, our philosophy is, at least on my side, and again, I'm speaking to as a Power Platform person, that we'd like you to encourage people to start with Power Platform. And then when you get to that point, that cliff, where you feel like you can't go any further, you can with the help of Azure. So that's our recommendation. Again, if you talk to an Azure TS, they may have a different point of view on that. No comment. Um, so I'm going to start with a demo, and I'll be totally candid. This demo is canned to click through. Don't worry though, I'm gonna go without a net here in a little bit. But I want to do this because I kind of want to set the stage, explain the why. Why does this demo exist? Why does this solution exist? And give you some context before we get into the nuts of it. Also, as you'll see, there's some new features that we're adding. My colleague and I are working on right now. So let me set the stage. This was originally created for a government agency. They had a strong background in Azure, and they knew what they wanted to do with Azure. They wanted to use Azure to do batch transcription. They wanted to transcribe interviews, where two or more people would be talking, and they wanted to transcribe that, and they wanted to do it in bulk. They wanted to be able to just kind of process it really quickly. The problem they had is they didn't have a front end. And for a lot of different reasons, some of them not technical at all, but for a lot of reasons, they came to me and my colleagues on the low code side of the fence and said, hey, could you build us a front end? Now, I mentioned earlier that I always recommend starting with Power Platform. This is one of the opposite cases where they actually started in Azure and went to Power Platform. You can go either way. In this case, they had a back end, they had an understanding of the underlying technology that was being used for the transcription, but they didn't have a great user interface. They didn't have a great way for users, end users, to interact with that Azure API. For those who don't know, that's API is the underlying code that allows two systems to talk to each other. I'm probably butchering that. If anybody else wants to put in the official definition API, feel free in the chat if you don't know it. But again, I put the names on here, and I believe, I haven't checked recently, but I believe Grayson Bishop is on the call right now. He is a gentleman who just joined Microsoft not too long ago, and he and I are actually working on a new version of this demo. So his name's on there along with several others that I've worked with, all very smart gentlemen, and very excited to have Grayson on the call so he can keep me honest. So what I'm going to show you basically is a solution that allows the employees at this agency to load an audio file in using Power Apps, and then use Power Automate to then move that audio through this sort of chain of events here. Now, I only put Power Automate on this diagram once because it would be very convoluted if I showed you every single place Power Automate works. I'll show you later when I get under the hood how many different Power Automate flows we have. But just know that pretty much every arrow is Power Automate to varying degrees. So arrow equals Power Automate. It's the connective tissue that connects everything together. But I'm going to just move this file over using Power Automate. And what I'm going to show you now in this demo that I recorded a while ago is how this is done. Now, I may have forgotten to share my audio. I don't know if I can add it afterwards. Well, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to go with it. We're going to roll. How many of you like podcasts? Anybody here love podcasts? If you like podcasts, this is one of my favorites. It's actually by the product team at Microsoft, specifically the Power Platform product team. It is done. I don't know how often they do it, but it's pretty regular. I don't know if it's weekly or monthly, but they do it pretty regularly, and it's available wherever you find your podcast. And I know I'm rambling here, but I just wanted to put a plug in there and just say, this is something that you might want to check out. You might want to add it to your list. It's short. It's like 30 minutes usually, and it's all things Power Platform. Definitely recommend it. So in this example here, I'm going to come into my Canvas app, and I'm going to upload a file. In this case, it's an MP3 file, but it supports several different formats. I'm going to go ahead and load it in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify how many speakers am I expecting. Now, this is a limitation of the actual underlying API. I needed to do this so it knew how many speakers to expect. Because what I can do, what it's doing under the hood, is it's actually going to what's called diarization, where it's actually going to separate every single speaker in the transcript. So I'm going to have as many speakers as I tell it to expect. It's going to do its best to make that identification using sort of magic. Not magic, but I like to think of it a little bit of magic. But yeah, using the underlying machine learning that it has, it's able to actually pick out distinct voices. But it has to know ahead of time. It's not smart enough to just sort of figure it out. You kind of have to tell it. At least in this current iteration. Who knows? Um, so that's the first part. Now that's like that takes it and puts it into the queue, as it were. For timing's sake, I'm just going to fast forward a little bit and just know that it takes a little bit. The longer the transcript, the longer the audio file, the more time it takes. But in the background now, it's going through this process here of using Azure Speech to Text. That is the underlying Azure service that we're talking about here. It's taking that audio file, it's transcribing it, it's diarizing it. So it's saying, oh, you expected 4 speakers or 3 speakers. I'm going to go ahead and figure that out for you. And then it's using some other technologies like AI Builder to help me with summarization. So if you've ever used Copilot or ChatGPT to summarize a document, it's very similar technology. The idea here is we're using generative AI. We're passing in that transcript that we've just created, and we're asking it to summarize it for us. So again, if you're not familiar with the audio file, and if it's an interview with people you've never heard from before, if it's brand new audio, this will gives you a quick overview of what it is before you ever actually have to go in and listen to it. And the last sort of rip stop in the chain here is Dataverse. So if you're not familiar with Dataverse, Dataverse is our bedrock on which all Power Platform is based. It is a premium service. So for those of you who don't use our premium services, know that you're missing out. But you can get a taste of it, and we'll talk about this later if you want. There's Dataverse for Teams, which I'm not going to get into today, but just shout out to Dataverse for Teams. It's a great place to get started if you're not using premium licensing today. All right, so here I am in that Canvas app, and that I've gone through the workflow. It's done all the processing, and this is what I get. I get a summary, which I can then drill into, and I can see the summary here that was generated by AI. And again, this is totally AI generated. I didn't add this at all, but you should always triple check, double check, at least triple check AI, generated AI. And so what we do is we have the ability here to go in here and make changes. So I can click the edit button and I can come in here, and if there's something wrong, or if I missed something, or if it didn't get misinterpreted, I can make a change. So I can edit that summary. And that's a best practice. Whenever you're using generative AI, you should put some checks in place, either during the workflow, which you can do, or afterwards. That's part of our responsible AI. And then here we have our playback screen. This is sort of the real meat of it here. Now,
Hey everybody, this is Future Sean. In this episode, right after introductions, my internet goes away, and so I want to give a huge shout out to Ken and Wendy for holding this one down while I wasn't there.
I don't know if you heard that, but that was
We
me
did.
playing. Okay, great. So that was me playing the audio.
And we do different types of analysis to understand where they're at in their technology investments today.
And that was me fast forwarding a little bit further, and again, watching that audio sync with the play bar. Now, everything you're seeing on this screen came with Canvas apps out of the box. There's no custom controls, no pro code involved. This play control already exists in Power Apps. This was something that was a bit of a challenge that I took up originally. Again, when the customer came to us and said, we need a tool to do this. We want to be able to edit the transcripts. We want to be able to play it back and edit it. And there are many, many ways to do what I'm showing you. Not necessarily saying this is the only way. I'm certainly not saying it's the only way. I'm not saying it's the best way. There may be other ways. not, so what I would say is, if you are more experienced, you may be able to make your own version of this. You also may be able to buy something off the shelf that does this. Remember that my customer was limited because they were in a very restricted cloud, government cloud, so they didn't have access to all the features and all the software that might be available to regular customers. So and I'm only just saying that just to kind of for frame this, knowing that this particular use case may not resonate with everyone on the call today. But I really hope you take out of this that the real lesson from here is that you can use both Power Platform and Azure together. And this case is just one example. Another thing you can do is we can come in here and we can edit. And we can come in here and make changes. And again, remember, this is AI it's not AI generated technically. Well, it sort of is. Depends on your definition of AI. The point is that you should make sure you double check it. Sometimes transcriptions, they don't get it right. So here we are, it's transcribed. Another thing that you'll notice here, it says speaker 4, but that's not really useful. So what I've added is an additional capability to actually relate a phrase or sentence to a person. I created a separate table in Dataverse called speakers. I'm adding that person's name to the list here, and I'm now creating a relationship between this instance and this person. And the option to do a batch update, which is basically going through every instance of speaker 2 and renaming it to this person's name, who happens to be Juliet Helms, is a way to speed up this process. So for the end user, if speaker 2 is Juliet Helms, you can do that update once, and it updates every instance in the Dataverse tables. And then another thing I added is the ability to create a PDF of the transcript. And this is generated at the beginning. And as you'll notice here, when I get into it here, you'll see it's got a lot of details there, including that summary that I mentioned earlier. And then it has the transcript, but it only identifies the speakers by number. And that's because this PDF was created before I added Juliet into the system. So what I have to do is I have to regenerate that PDF. And there's a little button down there called regenerate. So I'm going to come in here and regenerate here that PDF. And it takes not too long. It takes a little bit of time here. And this is actually calling Power Automate. And it's generating that file. And I sped things up for time. And you'll see here now, instead of numbers, it is names. So again, diarization, that as of today anyway, in the Azure Speech to Text API, diarization is not smart enough to identify the actual person talking. Now, if you're using, let's say, Teams, and you're using transcription and you're using AI meeting summaries, Copilot meeting summaries, that's smart, and it can actually tell you who said what. But that's because it has some additional information, additional metadata. But this particular system, as it is right now, is not quite that smart. Now, will it get there? I hope maybe someday. But right now, it's an extra step that you have to actually convert those numbers into people. I'm hoping someday that we don't have to do that. But as of right now, that's what you have to do. And so just wrapping up this click-through demo, I want to just say, this is available today. And if you go to ak.msfedba, and I'll post the link in the chat here in a minute, you can actually get this solution more or less as is, as you just saw, and you can actually download it and play with it. It was designed for GCC High. It should work in commercial. If by chance you work in the government community cloud or GCC, it may not work as is. But we're working on that, which is the next part of my demo. Before I get into the actual demo, I'm going to take a look at the chat and see if there's any questions. I don't see anything. Does anybody want to come off mute and ask me a question before I get into the next part of my demo? While I take a sip.
I will just say, if I see anything in the chat, Mr. Jamie, I will bubble it up for you.
All right, great. No worries. I was just taking a little break. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to move into the live portion of my demo. and say a prayer to the demo gods. We'll all be in this together. Hopefully, you'll see some cool stuff, or you'll see how to troubleshoot Power Platform. So either way, it's a learning experience for us all. So I'm gonna just stop sharing, and I'm gonna go ahead and this. Let me reshare. Boom, 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 boom.
We did get a question. Thank you, Kanga. Can
Azure
speak?
speech?
Yeah, there you got it.
Interesting. So this solution can't, but there is an API for that. So I'm using the Azure Batch speech to text, which is, as it implies, the ability to do batching. But there is an additional API that could do a stream, and that obviously is again the underlying technology that you would see in a lot of things. Like, for example, if you were to turn on captions right now in Teams, that would be similar technology. But yeah, it's a great question. All right. So I'm going to come in here and you should be seeing my screen, hopefully. This is Power Apps, for those of you who haven't seen it before. And I'm showing you here is the solution. And this solution, for those who don't know, solutions are a container that contain all the elements, including the apps, the flows, connections, all the things go in there. And this allows you to package them up, literally, as a zip file and move them, or in other cases, share them, like with GitHub. And so this is the sort of original OG version. There's a few other versions floating out there, but this version is the one we're working on right now. And what I'm going to show you just real quick here is just navigating through here, the elements here. So if you haven't seen the solution before, this has all the elements here, but you can also drill in here. You can see apps. In this case, I've got 2 apps. I've got my cloud flow, which I'll dig into a little bit later. We use environment variables. Environment variables are a nice way to store information that you want to pass on necessarily between environments. For those of you who don't know environments, environments are sort of security containers, security boundaries within your tenant. So your tenant is all up. Everything associated with your ID, your email address, is inside a tenant, and then an environment is a subset of that. And so you can actually come in and create multiple environments in Power Platform, and that gives you the benefit of being able to do say a development environment where your developer does all their work, a test environment where your developer and your testers test solutions before they go into the actual production environment. And so that's the sort of best case scenario. Not everyone has the luxury of using those kind of environments. If you're using standard licensing, you probably aren't doing that. But if you're lucky enough to have premium licensing, that's the recommended approach. So this example here we're looking at is the developer environment that I work in before I necessarily elevate it to other places. All right. So what I want to talk about now is sort of the big change. Grayson, who's on the call here, came to me recently and asked me if we could modify this. And if I'm remembering this, Grayson, feel free to just interrupt me. But one of his customers actually wanted to add translation capabilities, which, going back to Gregory's ask at the beginning of this, I hadn't thought of doing translation at the time, but I took the challenge up. Both Gregory and I, both Grayson and I took up the challenge, and we've made some changes to the solution, which we hope to make available soon. So this is the new version, the new flavor, which allows you to come in here and actually select the output language. So in this case, it defaults to English US, but you could change it to any number of languages. And then it allows you to tell it what kind of source languages you are. Now, the current batch to text transcription is not smart enough to know what languages are what. So there's one limitation, but as you'll see, there's other parts of the Power Platform, other parts of Azure that are smart and don't require you to declare the language ahead of time. But for the sake of this, we have this here. And what I did is I went in and I did a transcription. So if I come down here to this one here, and I click details, you'll see that I have a summary here in English. If I go to playback, you'll see now it has the original language and the translated language here. So if I play it, you'll see the audio was in Spanish, and I have the translation here. And again, I can jump around here, and I've gone through and I've updated this with the speaker names and all that stuff here. But it gives you a rough idea of what it looks like. And so this idea here, again, is that potentially, in case Grayson, his customer, would potentially need a tool that could do the transcription and the translation. So think about interviews potentially with two different languages being spoken, two or more. This solution can do that. It can take one language and convert it into another. And then you can do a transcript, which again can do the transcription, but it can do it now in two languages. So you've got the original and then the translation here. So that's sort of the big change. This version is not yet fully baked. Where Grayson and I are still working on it. He's working hard, and I'm working hard. We're going to try and get the version of this up onto our GitHub repo soon. This is the repo as it stands right now. I've got lots of documentation, user guides. As you can see here, the last version was almost a year ago, but we're working hard on trying to get a next version out before July, hopefully, knock on wood. But that's what it looks like. Now let's get under the hood though. Let's take a look at what it is and how it was built. I'm sure some of you are interested in this. I'm not sure. Actually, let's with the time we have left here, what of this do you want to see more details on? Since we only have a few, I can't go. I could go all night on this, but I don't want to take everyone's time. Does anybody have a strong request? Like, do you want to know more about the flows? Do you want to know more about the Canvas app? Do you want to learn more about the Dataverse? Like, what would be of interest to the folks on the call?
This is your chance, people. Whatever you get to
Choose your own adventure.
Jinx.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything, I'll go through on. I'm gonna open up. Oh, hold on. We got a comment here. Oh, okay. All right. I see how that is. Azure. All right. Cool. All right. So yeah, Dataverse. Okay. Excellent. All right. See, I don't know what people are interested in. I'm happy to go into that some more. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Azure. So Azure, what you're looking at right now actually is Azure Government. Now, it's similar but not the same as what you would get in Azure Commercial, which is where majority of you, I think, probably are. If you're in Azure Commercial, you'll have additional features that aren't available yet in Azure Government. So again, keep that in mind when you think about the way that we solution this. But essentially what we're doing here is we're actually coming in here and we're creating a resource group in Azure, which is sort of a container. And within that, we're creating an instance of the Azure Speech Service. And so I've created my Azure Speech Service. And then once I have this configured, I can do some other things. I can set up a service principal, and I can create the connections. So for example, I can come down here, I can see the keys endpoint. I'm not going to click on that just because this is being recorded, but just know that that's where you would set that up. And then when you're back in the solution, when you go into flows, I'll start with the very first one here, which is what kicks things off. This is the very first flow in the chain. This flow's only purpose really is to get things started and to actually move that file from the Canvas app into Azure. And so what I'll do is I'll show you how it does that. And this is where the first connection to Azure is. So I'm using out of the box, this is a built-in connector. And this actually is allows you to connect to Azure out of the box without having to do all the service principal stuff. You can just log in and it'll know who you are and it'll make the connections. And then you'll see here what I've done is I'm storing those environment variables I mentioned at the beginning. I'm storing details in the environment variables. That way, this solution is much more flexible. I'm not hard coding the account name. I'm not hard coding this folder path into the solution. That way, when I share it on GitHub, when you download it, when you start working with it, you can configure it the way you need to configure it, which is obviously better for all of us. And then, so yeah, so this is the first thing we're doing with Azure. So that's the first thing. So again, we're using Azure Blob. I didn't mention Blob Storage. I apologize. Before you get to speech services, you actually need to set up a storage account. And with that, you can then store your information here. So this is my storage account. If I go into containers, you'll see I've got my containers, which are basically folders. And I can see here, and here I've got all of those files that I'm using here. So everything that I've done since the beginning of time, it looks like I've got all my tests in here stored here. And so this is actually sort of the way it starts, is you get the file in there. And I have more details in here in the notes about how to get things set up. Again, this is slightly outdated to what you're seeing right now on the screen. But this is the version that you could potentially download tonight and get started with. So that's there. So there may be some other additional steps I'm overlooking here. But yeah, so that's the gist of the Azure. Another piece to the Azure is obviously the part that most people are interested about, which is the actual transcription. And so that I'm doing here in this flow. And what I do here is I'm using Power Automate. Actually, I'm going to switch over here. One of the things you'll notice is if you use Power Automate and you go into the Power Automate instance here, it gives you the option to edit in the quote unquote new designer, which I highly recommend. And depending on where you are, if you're in commercial, you may have different options. But in this particular tenant, it only seems to show up when I'm in Power Automate. It does not show up when I'm in, for some reason, in here. But this is the new instance here. I like this. It's a little easier, I think, to see. Basically, what I'm doing here is I am coming in here and I am using, again, out of the box connector. This is, in this case, the batch speech to text connector. So this is, again, built in to Power Automate, built into the Power Platform. And so, again, you don't have to actually know the API, although you probably want to do some research because this particular connector is a little tricky to configure. But there's a lot of little things you've got to get working here. But in a nutshell, what this does is it takes that file and it runs it through. It looks at the parameters you're giving it here. And again, I explain this in more detail in the documentation here. But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm running two versions of this. So I've got a flag here. Is it translated? So this I added recently because, again, up until recently, I wasn't doing translation, but now I am. But if I'm not translating it, I don't need to do certain things. So I have two versions of this running. And so I have the transcription version that needs the translation and transcription version that does not. And so depending on that, and the main difference there is just that I've got a field here that I don't need to pass information to. So there's a field that I can leave blank. But just for the sake here, another limitation that we discovered is the Power Automate is not able to get triggered when the file is done. So when the transcription is done, so I had to actually create my own sort of workaround. So if you've never done a loop before in Power Automate, you can actually create loops, and the loop will actually run until the transcription is done. Now, you'll also notice as you look at this that there's a lot of child flows. Anybody here use a child flow who isn't Grayson? Charles. Oh, great question. Gregory. Oh, do you have your hand up?
I was just saying using child flows.
Yeah.
And child
Excellent.
flows.
So Charles, I don't know what the limit is, and I've done this primarily because it helped me as I was building this out. being able to build it in steps and being able to debug in steps helps. So that's my biggest advice. If you're building a really complicated process, consider breaking it up in a natural way. Now, maybe I don't need quite as many child flows as I have. I probably could condense this down a little bit. But the nice thing about this is that when I want to tackle a specific piece of the automation, I have them separated out here. And you can see I use my own naming convention here. You should obviously choose whatever naming convention you like. My advice would be if you're working in a company or organization, follow the best practices that your team has created. And if you haven't created them, work with your team to create a naming convention that you can all follow because it'll help. Trust me. So again, this idea here of child flows, I think helps because there's going to be situations where you're going to have to add pieces to this. But the real reason to use child flows more than anything is this idea of reusability. So my advice to you is when you're designing, when you're thinking about your solution, think about child flows as sort of like little modules that you can actually create and then potentially reuse. So if you find yourself having to do something more than once inside of a Power Automate flow, maybe that's a use case for a child flow. Maybe, not always, maybe. Again, it really depends, but that's my advice. And again, take it as a grain of salt. There's probably a lot of opinions about that, either on here on the call or elsewhere. But yeah, so that is that. And let's see, Kunja says it doesn't allow me to get Azure. Is you able to say I did the same thing? Can person A do the Azure setup if they have already access to Azure and give me the creds and configure info for Power Automate? Yeah, in theory. In theory. And then Grayson seems to have chimed in here. 500 actions per workflow. Yep. That's also, so that's the other end of the extreme. So if I would strongly discourage you from putting 500 actions. And for those of you who don't know what an action is basically any box below the first box. So this first box is the trigger, so it starts the flow, and every box you see after that is an action. And there is a 500 action limit, but if you're getting up to 500, it's probably not going to perform very well, and it's also going to be a nightmare to maintain. So definitely consider breaking it up. For sure. Oh, and this is that loop I was talking about here. And I had some help from Grayson on this. He helped me streamline it a little bit. But basically, what this is doing here is it's actually using a similar but not the exact same action as before. Again, same connector. And it's actually looking for that transcription to make sure it's completed. And if it doesn't get it, it does it until it is either succeeded or failed. So it's looking for that. And if I click on here, there's the code here. And this is why I like the new designer, because you can see the code a lot easier. If you've used old school Power Automate, you're probably aware how hard it is to do the code in there. Another thing that's great is it comes with Copilot now built in, so you don't have to know this language, which is not the same language that's used in Canvas apps. But you can use this to create your code for you and help you figure things out. So that's to me really handy. Also, you get Copilot right there. So shout out to Copilot. You can actually go in here and actually start building and editing your flows here, which is also really helpful. So if you're not as familiar with these things, take advantage of Copilot if you have it there. And this, by the way, this Copilot is included with Power Automate. So this is not the same as M365 Copilot, which requires licensing and all that, which is not what we're here to talk about. This Copilot, though, comes with Power Automate. And so definitely take advantage of that as you're building. It'll help you out a lot. And I don't need to save anything here. All right. So I think if I didn't answer all your questions about Azure, I apologize. But it seems like go on. It seems like the question is, can you access Azure? So the short answer, and if I mispronounce your name, I apologize, Kunga, is yes. If you have somebody willing to work with you, they could set up a lot of the things for you in Azure, potentially using a service principal, and they could potentially help you get that configured using that service principal. But they would have to give you that information and be willing to share that with you. And I don't know if that's something your organization will allow, but yes, it is potentially possible. They could also, another option is they could grant your account access to that specific resource in Azure. So they could give you the permissions to use that resource. Then it would not require service rental. It would just run under your credentials. So when you log in to that, say that connector and authenticate with your credentials, if you have permission to use it, it'll allow you to use it. So that's another option. Do you know someone from business side to access to Azure since company looks like as product from pure IT and not business? Yeah, I mean, so generally speaking, when it comes to Azure, you're right. Azure typically is not what a business user would be using. They would be using the low code tools. So you're probably going to want to I would start with seeing if there's a way to do what you need without using Azure directly. Again, you are using Azure with Power Platform, but you're just not using it directly. But it's a fair question. I don't know where you work. I don't know the internal politics of it. Every IT shop is different. Some IT departments are much more supportive of citizen developers, and others are not. Microsoft has no real, objections to you learning to use Azure, but your organization might not want you to get in there. Gregory, yes. Well, Azure is pay as you go. Like Azure, that's another thing. Azure is by default pay as you go. Now you do potentially get a credit if you're using under certain conditions. You might get a credit when you start using Azure for the first time. Depending on, again, I don't want to speculate on that. That can vary, I think, between accounts and tenants. But yeah, normally it requires a subscription, which is paid on the rears, as it were. So it's paid after the fact, as opposed to licenses, which are paid up front. So that's the fundamental difference there. So I would say look at what you can do today with Copilot. Look at what you can do today with AI Builder. And it's possible, maybe even probable that you could do some of the things that you're asking to do without having to get into the weeds, as it were, with Azure. But again, without knowing the specifics of what you're trying to do, I would be just speculating. I'm glad it is much easier and recommend to keep people out until it's necessary to bring them in. Thank you, Robert. Yeah. Yeah. So they have a professional opinion from a global admin. So yeah. Yeah, so rightly so, I think people can get into trouble in Azure if they don't know what they're doing. So yeah. All right. I've been rambling on a little bit, so I apologize there. So I was going to get into the Canvas app a little more, but again, looking at the clock, I know I'm coming up on 9 o'clock, at least on the East Coast. Anything else that you guys want to ask me about this? Anything else that you want to see?
Can I ask a random question?
Yeah, please.
So Stream, Microsoft Stream is somewhere you get a bunch of like video and audio files, and I mean you can download them, but is there any way to natively connect to Stream from Power Platform or with Power Automate?
Oh, there's always somebody who stumps you on a call.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So a couple things I would say. I believe there is a control in the Canvas app which allows you to play videos. I don't know if it connects to Stream off the top of my head, but we could take a look and see together and
It'd
see
be
what
so
happens.
nice to just like fetch it directly from Stream rather than having to, download, upload, go through some.
It does look like there is a stream control in Power Apps. It's currently in preview.
Ooh,
The Learn doc was
fabulous.
updated 4 days ago. I'll put it in the chat. So
Thank you,
I'll
Grayson.
No
press.
wonder. I love that. Thank you, Grayson.
Thank you. This is why I bribed Grayson to be on the call. I was like, come on, please come, please come.
That's funny. I'm sure
So
you
yeah,
won't have it in your GCC high.
yeah, I don't think so, but I'll take a look and see.
Oh, there it is. No, I see it.
Stream. Yeah.
Eat my words. Yeah.
Strangely enough, it is there. Not you can
That is
see it.
cool. So for those that don't know, when you record Teams, like the Teams we're on right now, it sends that video and you interface it through it with Microsoft Stream. So you could very well, have an easy way to connect directly to your Microsoft Teams recordings.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of an exact use case where building this out would be more easier than just going into Stream directly. But if there is a use case, there's a control, for sure. Yeah, your mileage may vary, but yeah, you could potentially connect it to a SharePoint list library with your recordings and create a gallery and click through and play your videos. So yeah, cool. Learned something new. Looking at the chat, anything else here? Okay. So just real quick, I'll just again, I'm here. This is Power Apps. For those of you who haven't seen it, this is a Canvas app. And the real difference here is, again, I have to basically control everything you see on the screen. So I'm responsible for the entire canvas. So every element, every control, as we like to call them, is on here by me, as opposed to a model-driven app, which is this. Model-driven apps are, as the name implies, they are determined by the underlying data model. And so all model-driven apps, for the most part, look the same. If you ever use Dynamics, this is the same interface that you have with modern Dynamics 365. And we call it the modern UX. And so this is the nice thing about this is it's much faster to develop. You can create apps really, really quickly with it. But the downside is it's all looks the same. And it's probably the biggest complaint we get from customers is that they don't like the user experience. They don't like the UI. There's some things we can do to tweak it, but when it comes to like really tailoring your user experience or your UI, that's what Canvas is for. And there's a mix. You can actually combine the two together. I won't get into that right now, but you could potentially put the same kind of Canvas app inside a model-driven app. But the reason I say all that is because in this particular use case, when I was adding the translation capabilities, I needed to deal with this part, which is selecting language. And then this was trickier here. I had to do the source language. Now, the API sort of dictated this. The API rules are kind of funky, but in order to do this, I had to include the output language. So I had to include that in the list. And then I have, let me close that. I had a long list of languages, like really a long list. But if I type here, you'll see here, I can search and it'll find it for me and then it'll add it. This whole thing, and let me just do that again. If I close out here, you'll see that what I have done is I've actually taken advantage of a couple of controls. So I'm using a gallery that I show and hide based on the value in my text search box, which I'm going to scroll over a little bit here. So if this has text, it's showing. And then this particular gallery is using the out-of-the-box search function to search for matches to whatever I typed in there. And then when I select it, it's adding it to a collection. So if I add a language, let me just go in here. We'll just do like that. It disappears. It clears this out. It disappears. And again, I had to do all this coding myself, and I'm using PowerFX, which is our Power Platform Power Apps language. And what I do here is I have another gallery. This gallery, its sole purpose is to show the selected source. So in this case, I have, looks like I've got three languages selected here. I see 3 buttons here. And then if I want to remove an item from this list, I just can come in here and click the little X and it removes it. And then you'll see that that list is now updated. If I come in here and I click here, it should only have 2. And so I had to do all this because of some underlying rules. And if you go into the API documentation, you'll see it gets a little weird. It gets a little wonky with the specifics. Another requirement was that you couldn't have 2 versions of the same language. You'll see how it says Spanish ESMX. So this is Mexican Spanish. But if I come in here and I try to type in a different Spanish, you'll see that it's grayed out. And that's because the rules dictate that I'm not allowed to add more than one Spanish. Again, that's one of the weird quirks of this particular API. But I had to create that enforcement here. And so I had to come in here and I had to create the rules for that. And so I come in here and you see the way I did that is I came down here to font style. And I went in here and I'll format this so it's a little easier to read, is I'm actually coming in here and I'm actually checking to make sure that this doesn't conflict. Another cool thing you can do is you can ask Copilot to explain the formula, and Copilot can come in here. And so if you ever end up inheriting a Canvas app, this can help you make sense of what someone else did. The best practice would have been for me to take some time and actually write a lengthy comment explaining this. So if someone like Grayson came in after me, they would understand what the heck was he trying to do here. But that's also why we have the GitHub repo. So again, best practice, document. And again, remember, you may be the only person working on this today, but guess what? You may put this down for 6 months. You may put this down for a year. I started doing this over a year ago. There's parts of this that I haven't touched in over a year. And if I go back and look at it, I'm basically a fresh set of eyes. I don't remember what I did and why I did it. So take the time to write some comments. But if you don't, now you have an advantage here with Copilot, which can actually help you out and try to help you decipher what's going on here, which is kind of cool. Didn't have that when I started doing Power Apps back in the day, so that's a nice feature. All right. And then the last thing I think, so again, I could spend hours on this. I'm not going to do that, but I just wanted to show you a few little quirks here. This version, like I said, we're going to hopefully get this up soon, so you can play with it if you'd like. For those of you that have the ability to set up Azure, and again, if you don't, there's other things you can do. Again, you maybe take some other lessons from this. But again, I hope this helps a little bit. So let me come out here. And then the last thing I'll show you is sort of the original reason we did all this was because the customer actually used to use Speech Studio. If you ever go into Azure, if you ever have access to Azure, there's a thing called Speech Studio, which is pretty cool. It has some really cool features. You can play around basically with Azure with this tool. And so they were actually playing around with speech to text, and they were doing all this here, and they basically needed this interface built out. And that's sort of the original reason we did all this, was because they wanted Speech Studio basically, but they wanted their own version of it. Now the other really cool thing is one of the things that I did with Grayson's help is I was able to use this new audio content creation system here. And I was able to do this to create those examples that you saw, besides the podcast one, which was in the recorded demo, but the ones I used as part of the translation thing. What I was able to do actually is use Copilot, give Copilot a prompt, ask it to create a transcript for an imaginary podcast about a topic. It did that. I was able to have it do it in different languages, Spanish and English. And then I was able to use this tool to actually come in here and actually create a podcast. Now, for those of you that are familiar with some of our competitors, there's products on the market that can do this without Azure. And Microsoft is also working on similar products, which I think some of which are available today in Copilot. But again, I thought it was kind of cool to show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we're diving into the world of Power Apps and how to explain them to Spanish-speaking audiences.
And all I did was give it a prompt, and I grounded it with the what is Power Apps page in our learning documentation, and it created this 3-minute podcast explaining having two people talk to each other, which I thought was kind of cool. And again, helps me to illustrate the translation piece.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Gregory, and all our friends here.